I didn't expect my straight boss to ask me how to flirt. Not in a joking way. Not in a hey man, give me some tips kind of way. No, he asked like it actually mattered. Like he'd been thinking about it all day and finally couldn't hold it in anymore. And the worst part? It happened when we were alone. It started at the end of a long Tuesday. The kind where everything drags just a little too much, emails don't stop, and by 6 p.m. your brain feels like it's been microwaved. I was packing up my bag, already half out the door mentally, when I heard his voice behind me. Preston, you got a minute? I froze. Thomas didn't ask for things like that. He usually just expected them. He was my boss after all. Confident, composed, always in control. The kind of guy who didn't hesitate. So yeah, him hesitating? That was new. I turned around slowly. Yeah, sure. He was leaning against the edge of his desk, sleeves rolled up like always, tie loosened just enough to look effortless instead of sloppy. He looked off though. Not physically, just something in his expression. Like he was debating whether to say something or not. You heading out? He asked. Yeah, just about. He nodded, then glanced toward the glass walls of the office. Everyone else had already left. The lights were dimmer, quieter, felt different, like we weren't supposed to be having this conversation here. Sit down for a second, he said. That should have been my first red flag. Still, I sat. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. I'd never seen him do that before, not like that. Thomas was usually sharp, controlled. But now, he looked almost nervous. I need your help with something, he said. I raised an eyebrow. Okay. He hesitated again, then gave a short, almost awkward laugh. I've got a date tomorrow. That caught me off guard. All right, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. And I don't know what I'm doing. I blinked. For a second, I thought he was joking. But he wasn't smiling. If anything, he looked more serious than I'd ever seen him. You don't know what you're doing, I repeated. Don't do that, he muttered. I know how it sounds. I leaned back in my chair, studying him. You've dated before. Yeah, he said quickly. But this is different. I didn't say anything, just waited. He looked down at his hands, then back at me. I think I've been doing it wrong. There was something about the way he said that, quiet, honest, like it cost him something to admit it. And I felt that shift, the one you don't expect. When a person you thought you understood suddenly shows you a completely different side. What do you mean? I asked. He exhaled, slower this time. I go in confident. I talk, keep things light, but it doesn't go anywhere. He paused. Or worse, it feels fake. That part hit harder than I expected, because I knew exactly what he meant. I'd been there, sitting across from someone, saying the right things, smiling at the right moments, but none of it actually landing. Like you were following a script instead of feeling anything real. He rubbed the back of his neck. You're good with people. I let out a quiet laugh. Am I? Yeah, he said without hesitation. You are. That surprised me more than anything else. I didn't think he paid attention to stuff like that. I've seen it, he added. The way you talk to clients. The way people respond to you. I shifted slightly in my seat, suddenly aware of how close we were, how quiet the room had gotten. And, I asked. He looked straight at me this time. I want you to teach me how to flirt. I stared at him. For a solid 5 seconds, I didn't say anything, because there was no way I heard that right. You're serious? Completely. I let out a breath, shaking my head slightly. Thomas, I don't. Come on, he interrupted. Just help me out here. There was something in his voice. Not demanding. Not like a boss giving an order. Something softer. And that made it worse. Because suddenly this wasn't just a weird request. It felt personal. I hesitated. Why me? He didn't even pause. Because you actually connect with people. The words landed heavier than they should have. I swallowed, looking away for a second, trying to ignore the way my chest tightened just a little. All right, I said slowly. Let's say I help you. He straightened slightly. Yeah. I met his eyes again. You're going to have to actually listen. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. I can do that. And no ego, I added. That made him laugh. You really think I have an ego problem? I gave him a look. Okay, fair. For a moment we just sat there, the tension easing slightly but not disappearing. So, he said, leaning forward a bit, where do we start? I hesitated, because I knew exactly where we should start. And it was a bad idea. You're going to practice, I said. Practice? Yeah. He frowned slightly. On who? I held his gaze for a second longer than I should have. On me. That silence that followed? Yeah. That was the moment everything shifted. And I think we both felt it. Because Thomas didn't laugh. He didn't brush it off. He just looked at me like he was actually considering it. All right, he said quietly. And just like that, I realized I might have made a mistake. The moment he said, all right, something in my chest tightened. I didn't expect him to agree that easily. I thought he'd laugh it off, make a joke, say something like, yeah, no, that's weird, and we'd both move on. But he didn't. He just accepted it. And now we were sitting there, across from each other, in an empty office that suddenly felt way too small. You're serious, I said, more to confirm it for myself than anything else. Thomas nodded once. You said practice, right? I did. I leaned back slightly, buying myself a second to think. Because now that it was actually happening, I realized I hadn't planned this part through at all. Okay, I said slowly. First thing, you're trying too hard. His eyebrows pulled together. I literally haven't said anything yet. I know, I replied, but I can already tell. He let out a quiet breath, somewhere between a sigh and a laugh. Great, so I'm failing before I even start. Kind of, I said, smirking a little. That earned me a look. Not annoyed, more like challenged. All right, he said, straightening up. Then show me how it's supposed to be done. There it was again. That shift. He wasn't treating this like a joke anymore. He was in it. And for some reason, that made my pulse pick up just a little. Relax first, I said. You're too tense. I'm not tense. You are. I'm sitting in a chair, Preston. I leaned forward slightly. Yeah, like you're about to pitch a business deal. That made him pause. Then almost reluctantly he leaned back, shoulders loosening just a bit. Better? He asked. A little. He watched me carefully now. Not like a boss. Not like someone evaluating work. Like he was trying to read me, and I had to look away first. Flirting isn't about saying the perfect thing, I continued. It's about how you say it. How you look at the person. Okay, he said. So, eye contact? Yeah, but not like you're interrogating them. His lips twitched slightly. You saying I do that? I'm saying you're intense. And that's bad. I hesitated. Because, no, not exactly. It can be, I said carefully. Depends on how you use it. There was a beat of silence. Then he shifted forward just a little, resting his forearms on his knees. And how should I use it? He asked. The way he said it. Lower. Slower. I felt it. That subtle change. And I knew he felt it too. Like this is normal, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Like you're just interested, not trying to prove anything. His eyes stayed on mine, unmoving. All right, he said quietly. So what now? I swallowed. Now you try. Another pause. Then he stood up. That caught me off guard. What are you doing? I asked. If this is practice, he said, adjusting his sleeves slightly. I'm not doing it sitting down. I let out a short breath, somewhere between a laugh and nerves. Of course you're not. He stepped closer. Not too close, but enough. And suddenly I was very aware of the space between us. Okay, I said, forcing myself to stay focused. Just start simple. Talk to me. He nodded once. Then there was that brief hesitation again, like he was choosing his next move carefully. All right, he said. So, I walk up to you. You already did. A faint smile appeared on his face. Don't interrupt. Sorry. He took another half step closer. Now it was definitely too close. Hi, he said. I blinked. Hi. Yeah, he said. We're starting simple, right? I huffed a quiet laugh, shaking my head. Okay, fair. But he didn't laugh. He just kept looking at me. And I felt it again, that intensity, but softer now. Less sharp. More focused. Hi, I repeated, a little quieter this time. See? He said. That already feels different. What does? This. He gestured slightly between us. I frowned. What do you mean? He didn't answer right away. Instead, his gaze dropped for just a second, like he was noticing something, before coming back up to my eyes. It doesn't feel like practice, he said. My chest tightened. It is practice, I replied. Is it? There was something in his voice now. Not teasing. Not exactly. Something more curious. And that made it dangerous. Thomas, I said, a bit firmer. Focus. I am, he said. And the way he said it, like I was the only thing in the room. Yeah. That didn't help. Okay. I continued quickly. Next step. You don't just say hi and stare. You build on it. All right, he said. Like what? Like. I hesitated. A compliment. Something natural. He considered that for a second. Then his gaze shifted again, slower this time. Taking me in. Not obviously, but enough. You're good at this, he said. I frowned slightly. That's not a compliment. That's an observation. Same thing. Not really. He tilted his head. All right, then what would you say? I exhaled slowly. Something specific, I said. Something that shows you're paying attention. Another pause. Then, his eyes dropped again. This time, longer. To my lips. And I felt it immediately. That shift. That moment where everything suddenly feels too real. You hesitate when you're thinking, he said quietly. I froze. What? You pause, he continued. Just for a second. Like you're deciding how much you want to say. My heart was beating way too fast now. That's? I cleared my throat. That's not flirting, Thomas. Isn't it? He asked. His voice was softer now. Closer. It's noticing something about someone, he added. You said that's what matters. I didn't answer, because technically, he wasn't wrong. But this didn't feel like practice anymore. Not even close. Okay, I said finally, forcing a small step back. Let's reset. He didn't move. Why? He asked. Because you're overthinking it again. He studied me for a second. Then slowly he nodded. All right, he said. Then you show me. I hesitated. Again. Because now I knew exactly what he meant. You want me to flirt with you? I said. Yes. Simple. Direct. No hesitation this time. And that somehow made it worse. I exhaled slowly, trying to ignore the tension building in my chest. Fine, I said. I stood up. Now we were face to face. Closer than before. And for a second, neither of us moved. See, I said quietly. First thing, don't rush it. His eyes stayed on mine. Okay, he murmured. And don't think too much, I added. Hard not to, he said. Then don't. I stepped just a little closer. Not enough to touch, but enough that I could feel the shift in his breathing. You start simple, I said. Like hi? He asked, a hint of a smile returning. Yeah, I said. Then I looked at him. Really looked at him. And for a second I let myself drop the act. Just a little. Hi, I said. Soft, easy, different. And the way his expression changed. Yeah. He felt it. I could tell. Hi, he replied, quieter than before. And just like that, we were no longer pretending. That hi should have been nothing. Just a word. Simple. Harmless. But it wasn't. Not the way he looked at me after. Not the way the air in the room shifted like something invisible had just snapped into place and neither of us knew how to step back from it. For a second, neither of us moved. Then Thomas let out a quiet breath, almost like he didn't realize he'd been holding it. Okay, he said, softer now. I get it. Get what? I asked even though I already knew. That feeling, he replied. It's not about the word. I nodded once. Yeah. His gaze stayed on mine a second longer than necessary. And you just do that naturally? I huffed a small laugh, finally breaking eye contact. Not always. Could have fooled me. There was something in the way he said it. Not teasing. Not casual. Something a little too honest. I shifted slightly, trying to reset the moment. All right, your turn again. He didn't move. Thomas. Yeah, he said, like he'd just come back to himself. Right? He straightened, rolling his shoulders once, like he was shaking something off. But it didn't fully work. I could still see it in his eyes. That focus. That awareness. Okay, he said. So, I approach. You're already here, right? A small pause. Then, you look different up close. My eyebrows lifted slightly. Different how? He hesitated. And for the first time since we started this, he actually looked unsure. Good different, he said finally. I smirked a little. That's vague. You said not to overthink it. True. Another pause. Then he stepped just a fraction closer. Again. And yeah, now it was definitely not professional. You're easier to read than you think, he added. That caught me off guard. What? You react, he said. Subtle, but it's there. I crossed my arms slightly, more out of instinct than anything else. You're analyzing me again. Am I wrong? I didn't answer right away, because the annoying part? He wasn't. Maybe, I said. His lips curved just a little at that. See? That's better, I added quickly. You're not forcing it. I'm just saying what I notice. Exactly. There it was. That was the point. And for a second, it actually felt like we were back in control of this. Like this was just practice again. But then, his eyes dropped. Not quickly. Not accidentally. Slow. Deliberate. And I felt it immediately. That same pull as before. Stronger this time. You keep doing that, he said quietly. Doing what? Losing your train of thought. My chest tightened. I'm not. You are, he said, stepping closer again. Now there was barely any space left between us. And I didn't move. Didn't step back. Didn't stop him. That pause, he continued. Right before you say something. His voice had dropped again. Lower. Feels like you're deciding whether to hold back. My heart was beating way too fast now. This isn't part of the exercise, I said. But it came out weaker than I wanted. Why not? He asked. Because this wasn't neutral anymore. Because this wasn't safe. Because I wasn't just teaching him how to flirt. I was reacting to it. That's not how a first date works, I said. No, he agreed. Another step closer. Now I could feel the warmth coming off him. But this isn't a first date. That silence again. Heavy, charged, and way too long. Thomas, I said quietly. Yeah, you're doing it again. Doing what? Crossing the line. He held my gaze. Didn't step back. Didn't apologize. Am I? He asked. And that question. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't even challenging. It was genuine. Like he actually wanted to know. And that made it worse. Yeah, I said. But it didn't sound as certain as it should have. Another pause. Then tell me where it is. My breath caught slightly. The line. He said it softer this time. Closer. Show me where it is. I swallowed. Because I didn't have a clear answer anymore. Not when I was still standing there. Not when I hadn't stepped away. That's what I thought, he murmured. And before I could respond, he shifted just slightly. Not touching, but close enough that it felt like he almost did. And that was somehow worse. You're not stopping me, he said. My chest tightened. I should, I replied. But you're not. No, I wasn't. And we both knew it. That realization hung between us, thick and undeniable. Then, finally, I stepped back. Just one step. But it was enough to break it. The tension didn't disappear. Not even close. But it cracked. Okay, I said, forcing a breath. That's enough for today. Thomas didn't argue, didn't push. He just watched me for a second, then nodded slowly. Yeah, he said, but the way he said it, like he wasn't finished, like this was just the beginning. Yeah. That stuck with me, even after I grabbed my bag, even after I walked out of that office, even when I got home, because one thought kept repeating in my head. This was supposed to help him with his date, but somehow, it felt like I was the one getting pulled into something I couldn't control anymore. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I kept replaying everything in my head, the way he looked at me, the way his voice dropped, the way neither of us stopped it when we should have. It wasn't supposed to feel like that. It was practice. Just practice. That's what I told myself at least 10 times while staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. Didn't help, because no matter how I framed it, one thing didn't change. Thomas wasn't treating it like practice anymore. And the worst part? Neither was I. The next day, I got to the office earlier than usual. I told myself it was to get ahead on work. That was a lie. I just didn't want to run into him right away. I needed something. Space. Time to reset. To act normal again. Except the moment I walked in. Morning. I froze. Of course. He was already there, leaning against my desk like he'd been waiting. I set my bag down slowly, forcing myself not to react. You're early. So are you. Yeah. A beat of silence. Then, you didn't text. I blinked. What? He straightened slightly. After yesterday. I frowned. Why would I text you? Another pause. And then I saw it, that flicker of something in his expression. Something almost uncertain. I don't know, he said. Just thought you might. That caught me off guard. Thomas didn't sound like that. Not unsure. Not like he was reading into things. Thomas, I said carefully. That was just practice, he finished. Yeah. He nodded once, but his eyes didn't leave mine. Right? There was something off in the way he said it. Like he didn't fully believe it. Or maybe, like he didn't want to. I cleared my throat, trying to shift the conversation. So, your date's tonight, right? Yeah. You ready? He held my gaze for a second longer. Then, not really. I let out a small breath. Great. That's exactly what I was trying to fix. He huffed a quiet laugh, but it didn't fully land. Come on, I said. What's going on? He hesitated. And yeah, that was becoming a pattern. I keep thinking about what you said, he admitted. Which part? All of it. That didn't narrow it down at all. You're gonna have to be more specific. He pushed off the desk, pacing a step or two like he was working something out in his head. About not forcing it. About actually connecting. He paused. About noticing things. I nodded slowly. Okay. That's good. That means it worked. Yeah, he said, but he didn't sound convinced. What? I asked. He stopped pacing, looked at me again, and there it was. That same look from yesterday. Focused. Intent. It worked, he repeated. Just not the way I expected. My chest tightened slightly. What does that mean? Another pause. Then, it felt real. The words hit harder than they should have. I crossed my arms slightly, grounding myself. That's the point, Thomas. Yeah, he said. I know. But he didn't look away. And now? I asked. He exhaled slowly. Now I don't know how to go back to pretending with someone else. That was a problem. Thomas, I said, more serious now. It's not pretending. It's just a different person. He shook his head slightly. Doesn't feel like it. It has to. Why? Because this wasn't supposed to be us. Because this wasn't supposed to be anything. Because you're my boss. Because that's the situation, I said instead. He studied me for a second. Then, okay. Simple. Too simple. Like he was accepting it on the surface but not really. Okay, I repeated. Yeah, he said. You're right. But his tone didn't match. At all. Before I could respond, he checked his watch. I've got a meeting, he added. We'll talk later. And just like that, he walked away. leaving me standing there with that same uneasy feeling sitting heavy in my chest. The whole day felt off after that. We barely talked. Just normal work stuff. Emails, deadlines, quick check-ins. Nothing personal. Nothing like yesterday. But every now and then, I'd catch him looking at me. Not obvious. Just enough. And every time, it pulled me right back to that moment. That space. That line we crossed and didn't fully step back from. By the time evening rolled around, I was already home, failing to distract myself. I told myself I didn't care how his date went, that it had nothing to do with me, that whatever happened between us yesterday didn't matter. Didn't buy it. Not even a little. I was sitting on my couch, half watching something I couldn't focus on, when my phone buzzed. I glanced down, and my chest tightened instantly. Thomas. For a second, I just stared at it. Then I opened the message. You busy? Simple. Too simple. I hesitated, then typed back. Not really. Why? The reply came almost immediately. Date's over. My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen. Then, can I come over? That's when I knew. Whatever this was, it definitely wasn't over. I stared at that message longer than I should have. Can I come over? There were 100 reasons to say no. Bad idea. Unprofessional. Complicated. And yet, my fingers were already moving. Yeah. I sent it before I could overthink it. He showed up 20 minutes later. No warning. No extra text. Just a knock at my door. I opened it and immediately knew something was off. Thomas looked different. Not messy. Not drunk. Not anything obvious like that. Just quieter. Hey, he said. Hey. For a second, we just stood there. Then I stepped aside. Come in. He walked past me. Slow. Like he wasn't entirely sure why he was here, but couldn't stay away either. I closed the door behind him. And just like that, we were alone again. So, I said, trying to keep things normal. How was it? He let out a short breath, running a hand through his hair. It was fine. That told me everything. Fine usually means bad, I said. He gave a small, humorless smile. Yeah. I leaned against the kitchen counter. What happened? He didn't answer right away. Just looked around my apartment for a second like he needed a moment to gather his thoughts. Then, she was great, he said. I frowned slightly. Okay. Smart. Funny. Easy to talk to. That sounds like a good date. Yeah, he repeated. But again, that tone. Like something was missing. So what's the problem? I asked. He finally looked at me. And there it was again. That same look. The one that made my chest tighten. I kept comparing it, he said. My stomach dropped slightly. Comparing it to what? He didn't answer right away. Didn't need to, because the silence said it for him. To yesterday, I finished quietly. He nodded once. That's not fair, I said, a little sharper than I meant to. I know. You can't expect every date to feel like that. I don't, he said. Then what? But I couldn't stop thinking about it. He interrupted. That shut me up, because there was no easy response to that. I'd say something, he continued, and then I'd think this feels forced. He exhaled. And then I'd remember how it felt with you. My chest tightened again. Thomas. And he shook his head slightly. It didn't compare. That silence came back. Heavy. Unavoidable. You're overthinking it, I said finally. But even I didn't fully believe it. Am I? Yes. He took a step closer. Not fast. Not aggressive. Just deliberate. You didn't feel it? He asked. I swallowed. Because that was the problem. I did. Thomas, that wasn't practice? He cut in again. I exhaled. Frustrated. Yes. He studied my face. Like he was looking for something. Something honest. And nothing else? He asked. My pulse picked up. This was the moment. The one where I could shut it down. Reset everything. Make it simple again. It got out of hand, I said instead. Not a lie. But not the full truth either. His gaze didn't waver. Yeah, he said quietly. It did. Another step closer. Now we were back in that space again. Too close. Too familiar. You stepped back, he added. I had to. Why? Because if I didn't, I wouldn't have stopped. Because I didn't trust myself not to. Because it was crossing a line, I said. There it is again, he murmured. That line. I held his gaze. It matters. Does it? Yes. He tilted his head slightly. Then why did you let it get that far? That hit harder than I expected. I didn't answer right away, because I didn't have a clean answer. I should have stopped it sooner, I said finally. But you didn't. No. Silence. Then, neither did I, he said. Something in his voice shifted. Softer. Honest. And that made it worse. Because now this wasn't just me trying to control the situation. It was both of us. Standing in the same place. Making the same mistake. I don't usually do this, he added. I let out a quiet breath. Yeah, I figured. A small, almost self-aware smile crossed his face. Yeah. Another pause. Then, tell me to leave. My heart skipped. What? Tell me to go, he said. And I will. He meant it. I could hear it. No pressure. No push. Just a choice. And suddenly everything felt very clear. This was the line. Right here. All I had to do was say it. Thomas, you should. I stopped. Because he didn't move. Didn't look away. Just waited. And I realized. I didn't want him to go. Not yet. You should probably not be here, I finished. Weak. Half-hearted. And we both knew it. A faint smile touched his lips. Probably. But he didn't move. Neither did I. And that was the problem. Because the longer we stood there, the harder it became to pretend this was still something we could walk away from. That probably should have been the end of it. It should have been the moment one of us stepped back, laughed it off, said something normal like, yeah, this is getting weird, and called it a night. But neither of us did. We just stood there, too close, too aware. And the silence? Yeah, it wasn't empty anymore. It felt like a countdown. You're not leaving, I said quietly. It wasn't a question. Thomas shook his head once. No. Why? He didn't answer immediately. Just looked at me steady, calm. But there was something underneath it now. Something less controlled than usual. Because I don't want to, he said. Simple. Too simple. My chest tightened again. You should, I replied. I know. But you're not. No. That was the problem. There was no confusion anymore. No pretending. We both knew exactly what was happening. I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair. This is a bad idea, I muttered. Probably, he agreed again. And you're still here. Yeah. A beat. Then, you could make me leave. I looked at him. Don't do that, I said. Do what? Put it on me. I'm not, he replied. I'm just saying you have more control over this than you think. That wasn't fair. And he knew it. Because he was right. I could stop this. I just wasn't. Why did you really come here? I asked. He held my gaze. Then took a small step closer. Not enough to touch. But enough that I felt it. I told you, he said. I couldn't stop thinking about it. That's not a good reason. It's an honest one. I didn't argue with that. Because again, he wasn't wrong. You're making this harder than it needs to be, I said. Am I? Yes. How? By standing there like that. I gestured vaguely between us. Looking at me like that. His expression shifted slightly. Like what? I hesitated. Because saying it out loud would make it real. Like you did yesterday. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Yeah, he said quietly. Because it worked. My pulse jumped. That's not the point. Then what is? That it wasn't supposed to be real. Another pause. Then, but it was. The way he said it. No hesitation. No doubt. Just certainty. And that hit harder than anything else. I should have stepped back again. Should have created distance. Reset everything. Instead, I didn't move. And neither did he. You keep saying there's a line, he said. My throat felt dry. There is. Where? Here. I gestured weakly between us again. This, I added. This is where it is. He looked down for a second, then back at me. And what happens if we cross it? My heart skipped. We shouldn't. That's not what I asked. Silence, because I didn't have a clean answer. Not one that didn't scare me a little. You're my boss, I said finally. There it was. The real reason. The solid one. The one that actually mattered. Yeah, he said. And this, whatever this is, it complicates everything. I know. Do you? I do. But you're still here. Yeah. God, that answer again. So simple. So frustrating. Say it, he added suddenly. What? Say you don't feel it. My chest tightened instantly. That's not. Say it, he repeated, quieter this time. Not pushing. Just asking. And that was worse. Because now it wasn't about rules or lines or logic. It was about truth. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And yeah, there it was again. That same feeling from yesterday. Stronger now. Clearer. Impossible to ignore. I didn't imagine it, he said softly. No, I admitted. The word slipped out before I could stop it. And the second it did, everything shifted. His expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. Like something clicked into place. You felt it too, he said. I exhaled slowly. Yeah. There was no point denying it anymore. Another step. Closer. Now there was barely any space left between us. And this time, I didn't pretend to stop it. This is the part where you tell me to leave, he said quietly. Yeah. I didn't say it. Didn't move. Didn't do anything. His hand lifted slightly. Paused. Like he was giving me one last chance to stop him. I didn't. And then, he closed the distance. Not rushed. Not aggressive. Just certain. And the second he did. Yeah. That line? We didn't just cross it. We left it behind completely. I don't remember who moved first. I just remember the moment everything stopped feeling like a decision. And started feeling inevitable. 1 second we were standing there, still pretending this could go either way. The next, there was no space left between us. It wasn't rushed. That's what stuck with me the most. No urgency. No panic. Just quiet certainty. Like we'd both already made the choice before either of us acted on it. For a second, everything else faded. The office. The rules. The fact that this was a bad idea. All of it. Gone. And then reality hit. Not all at once. Just enough to make me pull back slightly. Wait. My voice came out lower than I expected. Thomas didn't step away completely. But he paused. Gave me space. Just enough. This is... I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. This is not simple. No, he said. He wasn't even trying to argue it. That made it harder. We can't just pretend this doesn't matter. I added. I'm not pretending. Then what are you doing? He held my gaze. Being honest. That word again. Honest. Kept coming up. And every time it did, it made this harder to shut down. This changes things, I said. I know. At work. Between us. I know. Thomas. I know, Preston. His voice wasn't sharp. Just steady. Grounded. Like he'd already thought through all of this. Or maybe, like he didn't care about the consequences as much as I did. That doesn't bother you? I asked. It does. Then why? Because walking away from it would bother me more. That hit hard. I looked away for a second. Tried to think clearly. Tried to find something solid to hold on to. Because right now, everything felt unstable. Like one wrong step and this would spiral into something neither of us could control. You don't even know what this is, I said. Neither do you. That's my point. Then we figure it out. Like it was that easy. Like this wasn't complicated. Like we weren't risking anything. You had a date tonight, I reminded him. I know. And you're here. Yeah. Do you see how that looks? He stepped a little closer again. Slower this time. Careful. I see how it feels. My chest tightened. That's not the same thing. Maybe not, he said. But it matters more. I let out a quiet breath. Because part of me, the part one didn't want to admit, agreed with him. This can't be impulsive, I said. It's not. It kind of is. He shook his head slightly. No, he said. Yesterday wasn't planned. Tonight wasn't planned. He paused. But this feeling? That's not new. I just didn't recognize it before. That made me look at him. Really look. What are you saying? I'm saying it didn't come out of nowhere. My stomach tightened. Because if that was true, then this wasn't just a moment. It wasn't just tension. It wasn't just curiosity. You're overcomplicating it, I said, even though I wasn't sure anymore. Or maybe you're underestimating it. Another one of those lines. Too direct. Too real. I exhaled slowly. We need to slow down. Okay. That surprised me. You're agreeing? Yeah. Just like that. No resistance. No push. That doesn't mean I'm walking away, he added. Of course. It means we don't rush it, he continued. We don't pretend it's nothing. He paused. But we don't let it get out of control either. I studied him for a second, trying to figure out if he actually meant that, or if this was just another step forward disguised as restraint. You're serious, I said. I am. And you think that's enough? No. At least he was honest about that too. Another pause. Then, tell me what you want, he said. Simple question. Complicated answer. I looked at him. And yeah, the answer was there. Clear. Uncomfortable. Real. I don't want to mess this up, I said finally. Neither do I. Then we have to be careful. We will. Silence again. But this time, different. Less chaotic. Still tense. Still heavy. But steadier. And for the first time since he walked into my apartment, it didn't feel like we were about to lose control. It felt like we were standing on the edge of something. Something real. Something risky. Something that could go very right or very wrong. Okay, I said quietly. Okay, he repeated. He didn't leave right away, and I didn't ask him to. But this time, there was a shift. A boundary. Not the same one as before. Not as strict. Not as clear. But it was there. And as he stood there, just a little too close but not crossing that line again, I realized something I hadn't let myself think yet. This wasn't just a mistake anymore. It was the beginning of something. And I had no idea how far it was going to go. The next few days felt different. Not in an obvious way. From the outside, everything looked normal. We went to work. We kept things professional. Meetings, emails, deadlines, nothing out of place. But underneath that, nothing was the same. Started small. A glance that lasted a second too long. A pause in conversation that didn't need to happen. The way we both seemed a little more aware of each other than before. And once you notice that kind of thing, you can't unnotice it. We didn't talk about that night right away. Not directly, but it was there. In everything. Preston. Got a second? I looked up from my screen. Thomas was standing by my desk again. Same tone. Same words. But it didn't feel the same anymore. Yeah, I said. He stepped a little closer. Not too close, but close enough that I noticed. Client wants revisions on the pitch, he said. Can you take a look? Sure. I stood up, walking over to his desk. Normal. Completely normal. Except, when I leaned in to look at the screen, I could feel him shift slightly beside me. Subtle. But there. Right here, he said, pointing. His arm brushed mine. Just lightly. But it lingered for a second longer than it should have. And my focus? Gone. Completely gone. Preston. Yeah, I said quickly, forcing myself to look at the screen. I see it. You sure? Yeah. I wasn't. Not really. But I needed to be. We stepped back at the same time. Like we both felt it. Like we both knew we needed space. All right, he said, a little quieter. Let me know when you're done. Will do. Another pause. Then he walked away. That was how it went. All week. Small moments. Nothing big. Nothing obvious. But enough. More than enough. By Friday it was unbearable. Not in a bad way. Just too much tension. Too much unsaid. We stayed late again. Of course we did. That was becoming a pattern. The office was quiet. Empty. And yeah, that same feeling crept back in. The one from that first night. "You're doing it again," he said. I didn't look up. Doing what? Thinking too much. I huffed a quiet laugh. "You're one to talk." Fair. Silence. Then, "We've been avoiding it." I finally looked at him. "Yeah. No more pretending it's not there." "I'm not pretending. You kind of are." He wasn't wrong. I leaned back in my chair. "Okay," I said. "Then what do you want to do about it?" He didn't hesitate this time. "Take you out." That caught me off guard. "What?" "A date," he said. "A real one." I blinked. "You're serious?" "Yeah." I stared at him for a second. "You had a date last week. And I left it thinking about you." That did not help. At all. "This is a bad idea," I said automatically. "Maybe. You're my boss." "I know. That still matters." "It does." "Then why are you asking me out?" Because he didn't hesitate. Not even for a second. "Because I don't want to ignore this." Silence. Again. But this time. Felt different. Clearer. Like we'd finally stopped dancing around it. "You're really doing this?" I said. "Yeah." I let out a slow breath. Because this was it. The moment everything either moved forward or stopped completely. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" I asked. He shook his head once. "No." I studied him. Tried to find hesitation, doubt, anything. But there wasn't any. Just that same steady certainty. "Okay," I said finally. His expression shifted. Just slightly. "Okay?" he repeated. "Yeah." My heart was beating way too fast. "We try it," I added. "Carefully." A small smile appeared on his face. "Carefully," he echoed. And just like that, everything changed. Again. We didn't rush into anything after that. No sudden moves. No crossing lines we couldn't come back from. Not yet. But as we walked out of the office together that night. Not boss and employee. Not really. Something else. I realized something. That first moment, when he asked me to teach him how to flirt. Yeah. Funny enough, he didn't need to learn how to flirt. He just needed to stop pretending he didn't already know who he wanted to do it with. And somehow, that ended up being me.